Dungeon Meshi, or Delicious in Dungeon, is one of this anime season's hot new shows. Unlike a lot of other adaptations of beloved manga, I'd never heard of this one, but I decided to give it a watch after hearing some of the buzz and was definitely not disappointed. Dungeon Meshi is a show that lives and dies by its vibes. It's a pretty relaxed fantasy story with a lovable ensemble cast and is definitely not afraid to take on a slower pace, as opposed to rushing towards the next major plot point. It's definitely not a show I think everyone's gonna be able to get behind, but what I can say for certain is that it's definitely a show made for RPG fans, and clearly by one. Dungeon Meshi was written by Ryoko Kui, who, famously, plays a ton of video games, and most interestingly to me personally, and relevant to Dungeon Meshi, a lot of RPGs. From a Famitsu article she did, she recommends Disco Elysium, Triangle Strategy, Fire Emblem Three Houses, and even DQB2. Of course, she recommends a lot of other games, but I think her RPG library is much larger than the ones listed in just the interview. From her blog, it's clear she's a fan of Baldur's Gate. She's posted art of 1, 2, and 3, and according to fans of the manga, she was really invested in Baldur's Gate 3 back when it released. And I believe her love of games, and especially RPGs, really shines through in a lot of Dungeon Meshi's qualities. Of course, I'm sure there are some D&D inspirations in there, but as someone who's never played it, I'm sticking to talking about what I know. The series' main draw is its various species, and the attention Kui pays to their biology. Every single monster feels like it could truly exist by the rules of the world, and is perfectly fitted for its environment, the way evolution fits real creatures for their environments. Even in the intelligent races, the differences in lifespans and perspectives on various topics makes the world of Dungeon Meshi feel like one that makes logical sense and is also incredibly varied. Of course, you've got all the classics, from slimes to elves, but even slightly more obscure fantasy races like Undines. The level of detail paid towards things as specific as the logistics of how living armor functions, to things like mermaids being irresponsive to travelers trying to mimic their song, is the mark of someone who genuinely loves fantasy stories from the bottom of their heart and spends a lot of time experiencing and thinking about them. This world feels like it was lived in by creatures which don't simply exist for the purpose of storytelling, but because they genuinely belong in the world they exist in. The main party has an incredible dynamic, and genuinely feel like a group of friends, which I think very few ensemble casts are able to achieve. They agree and disagree, joke around, argue, and sometimes get angry at things each other do or don't say. But at the end of the day, they stick together and care for each other because that's how friendships work in real life. A lot of stories fall into the trap of having a group of characters whose relationships seem to revolve around a central character, when in reality that's just not how things work. Dungeon Meshi feels like it captures its characters' personalities and group dynamic perfectly, because everyone just acts human. It feels like every single character we've met has displayed their flaws while still feeling like people we want to love and root for. Laios' overenthusiasm to eat everything he can, Marcel's tendency to avoid acting outside her comfort zone, Chilchuk's apprehensiveness towards being open with his allies, and Senshi's refusal to rely on magic as a legitimate tool are all plain to see, but never detract from the fact we want to root for them at every turn. Of course, like I said, this series does feel like an RPG brought to life. Little things like adventurers refusing to eat monster parts and instead buying tons of cheap food, to characters dying and being able to be revived through white magic, provided their bodies remain intact, are just lined with love of the medium and some of its quirks. When Marcel first said she died before, I was honestly shocked, but it felt so natural. Of course people can be revived. They can in RPGs too. Also, I just want to gush a little bit about two things. I absolutely adore this series' magic system. If you want to win me over, just have a really fleshed out interesting magic system, and Dungeon Meshi definitely has that to a T. Also, the character designs. Not only does every character look unique and not have the same body type with different faces copy-pasted onto each one, but everyone is just genuinely gorgeous. Like, some of these characters are beautiful for no reason. The little I've seen of the manga is gorgeous, but I think the cherry on top is that it was also graced with what seems to me like a phenomenal adaptation. From being animated by my beloved Studio Trigger to having such an amazing opening and soundtrack to the incredible voice acting in both sub and dub, it really feels like the series was given the legs to stand on it deserves, and has the medium of animation to genuinely elevate the story that Kui originally told, without impeding on what made it what it is in the first place. This is the type of adaptation manga fans go to bed, see in their dreams, and wake up wondering how they had such a ridiculous idea. Let's just keep our fingers crossed that Dandadan can get the same love. Needless to say, Dungeon Meshi is a dream come true for more than just RPG fans. Every bit of it is oozing with love for not only numerous RPGs and fantasy works, but also its own world, story, and characters, and I absolutely cannot wait to explore more of what this series has to offer. These are going to be some really deep cuts, but it has similar vibes to Sowara and the House of Monsters, which is a relatively niche manga, and for some reason, Dragon Quest IX specifically. I can't explain why. I love everything I've seen of Dungeon Meshi so far, and it's shaping up to be a series that I love for a very long time. As usual, please watch or read it if you haven't, and subscribe if you enjoyed.